As one of very few people in the world who have ridden every other RMC hybrid and wooden coaster on the planet, I've eagerly watched the construction and testing of the newest one, Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. Construction of the ride started way back in March 2019, so it's been a long wait of over 3 years for the ride to open, but open it finally has. After numerous delays, Iron Gwazi gave its first public rides on the 11th of March this year, so now it was finally open. I booked my ticket to Florida to experience the tallest and fastest RMC in America, and the first one ever to feature a beyond vertical drop. So was it worth the wait? How does it compare to the other top tier RMCs? Let's find out. I'm roller coaster David, and this is my review. Let's kick off this review as always with a detailed breakdown of the ride's layout. As you leave the station, the track takes a turn to the left before a small drop sends you into another left turn and onto the lift hill. This lift hill takes you up to a height of 206 feet, or 62.8 metres, which is 1 foot taller than Steel Vengeance, making it the tallest hybrid roller coaster in America. It may even be the tallest hybrid roller coaster in the world, although there is some ambiguity here. The only competitor for this record is Zadra at Energylandia, which is at various heights reported by different sources in the region of 200 to 209 feet, with the most generally accepted height being the exact same 206 feet as Iron Gwazi, so perhaps they're both the tallest hybrid coaster in the world. Either way, the lift hill takes you to a pretty satisfying height and provides some lovely views of the park all the way up until you reach the top. It's here you're greeted by a 91-degree beyond vertical drop, where the bottom twists slightly to the right before pulling up into an outward banked airtime hill. Diving down to the ground, you pull up into a spiralling right turn, then the track twists to the left to invert into a barrel roll down drop that forms the ride's signature death roll. Next up is an overbank turn to the left that Busch Gardens thinks is an inversion, before a large wave turn takes you over the ride station. After levelling out, there's an upwards jump into a left turn, a sideways airtime hill, and then a left turn into a 0G stall. You then crest a small hill that transitions into a spiralling right turn before the ride's finale of a bunny hop, downwards turn to the right, then a powerful ejector hill, before an upwards turn to the left takes you into the brake run. As you can see, the elements are packed together thick and fast. There's certainly a lot going on this ride and a lot of different things to unpack, so let's look at a few sections in more detail. The first drop is undeniably impressive and it's a real highlight of the ride. This is the first time RMC have built a beyond vertical drop and it delivers everything you want from it. You might not think that going only 1 degree beyond vertical would make that much of a difference, but I think it does, as once the train starts free falling, you're ejected out of your seat regardless of whether you're in the front or the back. As a result, this is probably the best first drop on any RMC, and that's not a statement I make lightly. At the bottom of the drop, you're travelling at 76 miles per hour, and the sustained pull-out from it up into the first element creates some strong positive G, so much so that on most rides I experience some visual grey out here, shortly before all that positive G turns negative over the first hill and the blood rushes back to your head. It's a thrilling combination of forces and sets the tone for the rest of this wild ride. The first element is very similar to the second large hill on Steel Vengeance, almost a cross between a top part and an airtime hill, and it gives you some simply wonderful off-axis airtime. Probably my favourite moment of the ride, however, is the signature death roll inversion, as this creates an amazing sensation, particularly in the back of the train, as you're dragged downwards and spun head over heels. The acceleration and twisting during this element are unlike anything else, and it just keeps getting better and better as the ride speeds up throughout the day. On paper, it may be the same barrel roll down drop you find at the start of Twisted Timbers, Medusa and Storm Chaser, but this one feels very different, as you enter the element at speed, and there's a rapid change in the direction of banking as the track twists counterclockwise from the preceding upward helix. This means that the rotational forces are much stronger, and the way it feels in the back of the train is something truly special. The rest of the ride has airtime in all sorts of directions, and the pacing of the ride is simply fantastic. There aren't any elements I'd consider too small here, each one is impactful and meaningful on the ride, and every transition is smooth and well designed. The overbank after the death roll doesn't really feel like an inversion, which Busch Gardens says it is, but that's fine as an overbank here fits the pacing of the ride fine. The sideways airtime hill over the ride station is another great moment, although it's a bit of a shame that it couldn't have gone through the station itself, as that would be an amazing thing to see whilst you're queuing to ride. The finale of Iron Gwazi is two very strong ejector airtime moments, separated only by a rapid right-hand turn, and these ejector moments really pack a punch. In fact, they're probably equal to the strongest negative G you can find on any other RMC. These helped keep the rides pacing, delivering thrills right until the final brake run, but it does make the coaster a bit less re-rideable, as I found my legs were getting a bit battered and bruised by the strength of the airtime over these last two hills, after riding multiple times, and you almost have to defend yourself against it. As such, Iron Gwazi isn't a coaster I could ride all day, and after marathoning it for about an hour or so, I needed a break. This was, however, about a week into a trip which had already included Iron Rattler, the New Texas Giant and Velocicoaster, so maybe it's more of a cumulative effect forcing me to take a break rather than it just being Iron Gwazi's fault. The ride of course features standard RMC trains with their heavy lap bar restraints and shin guards, and whilst they aren't bad compared to some train designs, they're far from being the comfiest ones in the market. Thankfully, there's plenty of other things to do at Busch Gardens if you're needing a break from riding, and during my visit there was a food and wine festival on, which allowed access to a field in the centre of the park, where you could admire Iron Gwazi's layout from. It's quite an interesting layout too, when you consider what it's come from. Iron Gwazi is the replacement for the dueling wooden roller coaster Gwazi, and I think its layout is possibly one of the most unique amongst RMCs. To me, it's really surprising just how little of the original structure available was used in its construction. Whereas most RMC conversions use a lot of the original wooden coaster supports and often follow a similar overall layout, Iron Gwazi barely uses a quarter of the original wooden structure, and when you consider there was over 7,000 feet of track between the two dueling coaster tracks and Iron Gwazi's length is just over 4,000 feet, that's a lot of missing woodwork. This may have been out of necessity, however, as the wooden structure of Gwazi had been baking in the Florida sun for 20 years, and that probably didn't have the best effect on its structural integrity. They were able to use a much more significant amount of the old coaster's foundations, however, and I suspect this is where the designers had to get a bit creative, turning the very bare bones of two mediocre dueling tracks into one single amazing coaster layout with a brand new lift hill twice the height of any previous track work. I particularly like how Iron Gwazi uses a lot of the space left behind by Gwazi and goes back and forth across this space, rather than just going round a loop of the perimeter. Unfortunately, not everything is perfect with this coaster, and in particular, Iron Gwazi may have some reliability issues. I visited the park over 3 consecutive days, and every day the ride was having intermittent stoppages and shutdowns. Some of these seemed to be related to problems with the air gates, but other times there was an extended downtime with no obvious reason. This is particularly disappointing when you consider how long they've had to do testing prior to the ride opening. Other friends of mine visiting recently experienced similar delays, so it doesn't seem like it was isolated to my trip either. It's been a month or so since I was there, however, so hopefully these bugs have been fixed, or will be fixed soon, but don't be too surprised if there's some significant downtime whilst you're waiting to ride. Ride operations were generally acceptable, but didn't feel particularly fast. Iron Gwazi only has 2 trains and no mid-course brakes, so a new train can only be dispatched once the previous one's on the final brake run. This means ride ops have nearly 2 minutes to load a train, which is quite a generous time, but in spite of this they seem to frequently miss the mark, and as such queues could move quite slowly. One final thing I didn't like about Iron Gwazi was the station music, which is very heavy on the bass, and the sound you hear would seem to fit a large lumbering animal plodding along, which doesn't really represent the exciting dynamic ride that Iron Gwazi is. It's a shame the sound in the station is so muddy and bassy, as I've actually listened to the music at home and it sounds much better when you can hear something other than that bass line. So those are the good and the bad bits of Iron Gwazi, and overall I have to say it's a fantastic ride, with only those couple of small flaws. So how does it compare to the other RMCs, particularly the big 3 of Zadra, Steel Vengeance and the mighty Hakugei? Well, for me, Hakugei still reigns supreme as the #1 RMC and #1 roller coaster in the world. It's possibly an unbeatable ride with its amazing mixture of elements and pacing, but Iron Gwazi is definitely a top tier ride and well worthy of a spot in most people's top 10s. Comparing to Zadra, it's really quite a close call. Iron Gwazi felt like a longer ride, although they're actually very similar in length. To me it seemed like Iron Gwazi has more elements to it, and that it used up more of its energy by the time it was over, although that may be more to do with just how fast Zadra slams into its final brake run. Zadra's stall is better than the stall on Gwazi, but that's not too surprising considering just how much bigger it is, and Zadra doesn't have an element that can compare to the awesome death roll inversion. Against Steel Vengeance, I'll probably upset a few people here by saying that again, I prefer Iron Gwazi. I think the first drop is better, the inversions are better, and personally I'm really not a fan of the small elements towards the end of Steel Vengeance, so for me Iron Gwazi has the better overall pacing, and is the better ride in general. So there we have it, my review of Iron Gwazi, a fantastic new RMC with some wonderful elements, awesome pacing, and some extreme airtime that may be a little bit too much for some. Let me know in the comments what you think of Iron Gwazi and if you enjoyed my review. Also be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my upcoming reviews of Velocicoaster, Pantheon and Phonics. I've been Rollercoaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.